Pat Coleman. I'm the daughter of Dr. Arthur Coleman, and the building that we're standing in front of was the vision of my father, and it was built in 1960. So my dad was coming out of the Air Force, and he actually originally planned to practice in Georgia. He heard there was a small town in Georgia that needed an African American physician. So in driving there, he was in the Deep South. He came from Philadelphia, and he stopped at a gas station, and because he did not say "sir" to a young gas station attendant, he got a punch in the face. And so my dad said, I don't think I'm going to go to Georgia to practice. So he decided to come to San Francisco. And my dad was a real visionary. And I think once he got the lay of the land of the Bayview, there were a lot of African Americans that had moved from the South to work in the shipyards. And he realized that there was a real need for health care. Unfortunately, at that time, all of the ancillary services like X-ray lab, pharmacy, patients had to go outside of the community. So they did have a family doctor, but they had to traipse around town to get the rest of their care. And as I said, my dad was a visionary, and he said to himself that it would be great to have all of the services under one roof. And that's how the idea of this clinic began. So when it opened, he brought in a group of 12 different African American physicians, different specialties, OBGYN, surgery, radiology, you name it. And of course, my father was in private general practice. And he brought all of the services, including the lab, under one roof, which really made a difference in terms of people accessing health care. Because as you can imagine, if you come from a community that's, as they call, underserved, things such as going to places outside the community to get your services can be taxing. Mm-hmm. You know, there's a lot of challenges when you are in an area like this, and to put that additional burden on people to travel outside of the community just to have their lab work done just didn't make sense. So in 1960, the building opened, and the patients were able to come to this center proudly, first of all, to see these African American doctors all gathered under one roof and there to serve their needs.
We didn't have a large Afro-American population in the area, except in this community at Hunters Point, which was residual of the community that was brought here in World War II. As in Portland, there was a similar community which was wiped out in a flood. This community of Afro-Americans exploded after World War II. Yeah, so we took his example and put up a building over in Oakland. Mm. We put up a building over in Oakland because of this man's example. So, all this history, but he and Collins and Goodlett and Edith Austin were powers beyond medicine, social engineers. Social engineers.
What do you think the impact of this medical building, this practice, what impact do you think it had on this Hunters Point community directly?
It put the impact that you are not a forgotten people. It put the spotlight that you are also citizens and are deserving of all of the good that this country stands for. This is what those three people did. It made a people who had come here for the war as citizens to make you are now a part of the community. And this has been the process. This is what this stands for. This place stands as the birthplace of making this city conscious that all people are part of this great country, and we must move together to become that, what they say, this shining city on the hill.
Mm.
This is what it's all about.
I'm Gregory McDowell. Dominique's my son, and I've been coming here since I was 6, 7 years old.
Wow.
Yeah, and I'm 66. My best memory was seeing a doctor on a Sunday, you know. They don't do that anymore, you know, and I had a kind of bad experience. I was burnt. And the doctor came to the house, picked us up, me and my mom, came here and opened up the clinic. And that's unheard of now. But back then, doctors were almost family.
I think it was good that doctors at that time knew your whole family history. See, and it seemed like today we spread out between this doctor and that doctor, but I think he had our whole family genealogy all the way down, you know, from my grandmother. My grandfather came here, my father came here, my aunts and uncles came here. So it's like I was it was only destined
Generation.
for me, generational for me to come to see Dr. Coleman. And it's like I said, it was safety. You know, it was more safe, feeling comfortable going to the doctor. Because, you know, as kids, it's uncomfortable going to a doctor, you know? And having a doctor that, you know, your family trusts is important. I really think that our community has really fallen away to differences of, okay, as we're being gentrified, I think we're getting pushed out to a lot of different ways. And I think by this clinic being gone for so long, that I think the neighborhood and the community's health has went down because they didn't have a doctor overseeing the community. I think this building brings back love, generational gaps. We can bring it back together.
This building needs to remain. It needs to remain.
We just stay here. We need to keep
This is part of the neighborhood. When you say Dr. Coleman's office, everybody that I know black from this community knows exactly what you're talking about.
Right. So if we're here and get the word out like we're supposed to, and it passes on to the generations, we can bring it back around. You know, this is a very important place.
Yeah.
Very important. You know, just the building. Arthur H. Coleman written on the side of it means a lot. If you know about and a lot of people don't even know about the community like they should. You know, like I say, I remember this building.
Yeah.
And this was a place where you got well. And I think we need to continue getting well here.
Thank you.
I used to sit in some of the seats here. One of these, I don't know if it may be a new one, but the old one, let's call it the old one, waiting on Dr. Coleman. He was my physician for several years. And all while he was living, I was one of his patients. And so therefore, as a just respect for him, not only his medical practice, but his social and community practice within this neighborhood, I feel that I have that special connection.
What impact do you think this medical building has had on this Hunters Point community?
Well, one is, as you know, in your indigenous communities or poor communities, their medical needs are not met as a whole. Now, sure, I think the city have obligation to help any citizen within the city. But Dr. Coleman, at a time, recognized there was a great need because the African American population was predominant. Not that he just served African American, but he recognized that community was dominant. Plus, he also recognized that community was neglected in the medical field. So in turn, this building cries out and it stands as a monument of what that good work was done, because so many people that came, including myself, and got the proper advice medically and all of that.
My father was one of the doctors, he's a dentist, who opened this building and was part of the group of doctors that were brought together to create a medical facility that would serve the Bayview community. So my connection is through my dad and just growing up here. How long did Dad practice out here? 20 plus,
No,
25?
longer than that.
30 years?
Yeah,
So-
at least 30 years.
I definitely had a sense that he loved this community, and he was very, very, very involved. And so, for me, he left a great example of how you care for your community and how you make a commitment.
How would you measure the impact of these doctors opening up a medical building, essentially, you know what I mean, in February the 28th, 1960, when that was something that wasn't necessarily happening on the West Coast?
Those guys downstairs, they were the result, the proof in the physical motion and getting all that in action. They are the everyday hero of civil rights.
That's so true.
Yeah.
And I always say they did it in a human rights form.
Right.
Because civil is about legal stuff.
Right.
There is something about human dignity
Yeah.
that when
Yeah.
I look at those pictures, that's what I see.
Yeah, and I mean, they didn't.
You know what I mean?
Yeah,
I just thought that
and-
was just
and
like, wow.
And they grew up when people were protesting and stuff like that, and the building was open in that time. But how they were revolutionary is they were going to give something back. They were going to be positive. They weren't just going to talk positive or go
That's
out
right.
and tear something up and say, you know, I want positivity. I want to change. They were like, I am change.
That's right.
I am
Right,
change.
That's real talk.
Right.
And that's powerful.
Yeah.
It is. And I think Dr. Coleman, because he was the nucleus. Dr. Coleman, and if my dad was here, he always talked about how he was forward thinking.
Yeah.
And that he realized we have to do it for ourselves. Nobody's going to do it for us. And he was the nucleus of it.
Right.
And he brought a lot of those guys along and said, we got to do this.
Right.
Because at that time, I believe you couldn't go downtown and open an office.
It might have been 1960, but it
Yeah.
wasn't. It wasn't. You know, it wasn't open
Right.
to African Americans.
Right. And so you had to create your own.
Yeah.
And Dr. Coleman was the one who said we're going to do this, and they did it.
Yeah. But I think back to your original question I just think they were an example, a living, walking example of what's possible, and not having to preach. Just like, you know, I've done it. There's proof of it. We built this building. We're providing these services. Yeah, I think they were just a good example for what's possible.
I think the fact that Dr. Hall is in his
His
suite,
suite, yeah.
that's what that suite was. For me, it's just a warm feeling because I don't know him, but I know his family and I know where he comes from and I know his philosophy that I've learned from afar, and I know he will move I know he'll move it forward in a way that serves the community, which is what this building was built for, to serve the community.
Right. We should honor, just like we honor the first and so many other aspects of history. I think we owe it to history and to their place in history to honor them as being like one of the first African American groups in San Francisco to start practicing medicine in a cohesive way where you could come here and get just about any service you needed.
My name is Dr. Joshua Hall. I'm the Chief Dental Officer at the Marin City Health and Wellness Center. I actually currently work here at the Bayview Clinic, which is a satellite clinic. I've always had a passion to work for my community, and I originally was actually from the Bayview Hunters Point area. Grew up off of 3rd on Ennis Avenue. I've always known about this building. When I came back after my residency, I actually reached out to Patty Coleman, Arthur Coleman's daughter, and spoke with her about actually working here in this suite. Unfortunately, it didn't work out for about 2 years, and then Javon actually recruited me from private practice and pulled me over and convinced me to come on board and said that, hey, she really had a passion for opening up an FQHC or a nonprofit here in the Bayview, the Coleman Center, so automatically I knew it was a position for me.
How do you feel about working in a clinic that has such historical significance?
I feel great about it because it's something that I'm able to carry on a legacy. You know, it's something that Dr. Arthur Coleman, put into this community for a reason, and I'm able to kind of continue with his dream, of giving back to the community and the disadvantaged. So it really makes me feel good, and it's very rewarding to provide for the Bayview Hunters Point community.
I spent my teenage years in Hunters Point, and like many people who lived in or came from Hunters Point, Dr. Coleman at some point was my doctor. So I started my journey with this building with Dr. Coleman being my doctor and my daughter's doctor when we were hit by a car. Years later, I became a midwife, and I came back to this building to open a small midwifery practice. And that lasted for about 2 years until I moved. And coming back into California, I started working with Marin City Health and Wellness Center, and Pat Coleman, daughter of Arthur Coleman, contacted me to ask if we can bring our practice to this building. The Marin City Health and Wellness Center is a federally qualified health center. We provide medical, dental, and mental health services to all. We focus on low-income communities, and our mission is African American health equity. We moved over we expanded our services to the Bayview community about 1.5 years ago. We were asked by Pat Coleman, the daughter of Arthur Coleman, to come and to support her as she continued to try to save the building. We came over and we first brought medical services, and then we added dental services. So this building has struggled for years. I would say that this building has struggled for about 20 or 30 years to find, I'm going to say doctors initially, but black doctors to come back in and to kind of revive the mission of Dr. Coleman and the other doctors and dentists that were here. San Francisco has changed over the years. The black population has dwindled. Some say to 5%. I don't have the exact number, but with the dwindling of the black people, the resources dwindled, and then people just kind of went to whichever doctor they could go to, and the building just suffered. It was empty. It had very few tenants in the last 20 years, and I feel like gentrification was the culprit, and it is the culprit for other communities like this. I feel that it poses a public health crisis when you start to move people away from that which they're attached to, from the culture that they built, and that was the reality here.
So when you think about the fact that this medical building opened in 1960, how do you feel that the work that you're doing now with Marin City Health Wellness, how do you think that's connected to 1960 Dr. Coleman's medical building?
I think it is connected, period. I believe that we are trying to continue the work of Dr. Coleman. I know that we're trying to continue the work of Dr. Coleman. He started this building with the idea of black excellence. It was at a time when black people couldn't go anywhere they wanted to receive care, and black providers could not go anywhere they wanted to open practices. And so he and his partners decided that they were going to build something for themselves so that they could be healthy. And his vision for me, meant Black excellence. When, you know, there's photographs on the wall that show the group of providers that opened this building, and they were all excellent, and it was something to take pride in. I feel like the community knew that they were in good hands, and they knew that culturally they could relate to the people who took care of them. And we are trying to do the same thing. The mission of Marin City Health and Wellness Center is African American Health Equity. And through that, we are trying to build Black excellence, because Black people are still at the bottom of health outcomes. In all communities like this, we're at the bottom of health outcomes. And so we know that the answer is providing culturally appropriate providers, using culturally appropriate language, but also learning how to reconnect us. Through gentrification, we've been separated. And that's one challenge that we face now that Dr. Coleman and his team didn't face. This was the Black community, and they were here. For us, we are trying to bring back Black doctors and bring the Black community here at a time when we're being sent 50, 60 miles away and being detached from our community, from our families, from our churches, and from things that we know very well that keep us mentally and physically sane. At this point, we've leased the entire building, and we're preparing to enter into a renovation. The building hasn't been renovated since it was built, and in order to have the building license, we have to renovate the entire building. We've raised $1 million. We need an additional $1 million for the renovation, and when the renovation is complete, we'll have more medical space downstairs. We'll have a lab downstairs, which is important because there is no lab here. So if people need their blood drawn, they have to drive or get on a bus to go to another community in San Francisco to receive that service. So we'd like to bring that service here, as well as optometry. We're expanding our dental. It will go from 3 operatories to 6, so we'll be able to treat more patients in the community. And we're also expanding behavioral health and addiction services. Marin City Health and Wellness Center, through our behavioral health program, offers a Suboxone and Vivitrol in our effort to address opioid abuse in the United States. So we'll be also expanding that service here.
So how can people watching this video, how can they help?
Well, the most important way that someone can help us is to help us to raise the $1 million. So donations are important. But if that's not something that you can do, you can also contact us to find out what kind of muscle power that you can give us, because we are entering into a renovation, or what kind of other talent you have that we may need, such as public relations or marketing. We need community outreach. We just need to get the word out so that people in the community can be fired up and engaged in the fight to save their building.
We should be telling the history of this place. It's an inspirational health place. It's a good mental health place. It's a good image place. It is a symbol of the St. Francis spirit. You know, a gay lesbian can walk comfortable over, they should walk comfortable over here. A Black person walk comfortable here, should be able to walk comfortable everywhere. He or she gets strength from this place. I don't know. Don't destroy it. It is a symbol. They talk about the flag. These are the flags. This is the flag.
Thank you.